my pleasure at this time to introduce you to the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Rafi Gonsalves.
Thank you very much, Hans. Good evening to all our listeners, all the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I'm hoping you're having a wonderful and blessed evening. This program, Ask the Prime Minister, it's really parliamentary question time. The people will be asking the questions. And the ways in which we can have them asked is on radio here, but I've been asked several of them already. I've written questions and persons have met me and called in and indicate the subjects on which they would like me to speak. And then, of course, the lines would be opened so others can comment on these matters and to ask questions. We are hoping that this program would be on Thursday evening, but for logistical reasons, in part because I'm leaving the country tomorrow evening, we are having the launch, the inaugural program tonight. The days would be announced on an ongoing basis for the Ask the Prime Minister parliamentary question time. The first two questions been submitted in writing. I wouldn't call the name of the questioner unless, of course, he chooses to call in and identify himself, because I want to maintain the anonymity of the questioners. The two questions relate to marijuana. Each of the questions has two parts. The first one, A, can you please indicate what is the status of the Drug Advisory Committee under the Drug Prevention of Misuse Act? When was their last meeting held? How many times has the committee met for the last 5 years? B, given the important functions of the committee, could you let the nation know who are the members of this committee? C, with discussions going on publicly for changes in the regulation to consider the use of medical marijuana and possible decriminalization, could you let the nation know what are the constitutional rules of this committee in bringing about any changes to the present drug scheduling under the Act, and would they be required to perform these rules, notwithstanding any decision of the CARICOM Commission on Medical Marijuana? In order to answer the question properly, I want to turn to Section 3 of the Drug Prevention of Misuse Act, Chapter 284 of the Revised Laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The rubric for Section 3 reads, the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs. I go to the section now. Subsection 1. There shall be constituted, in accordance with the second schedule, an advisory council on the misuse of drugs, and the supplementary provisions contained in that schedule shall have effect in relation to the advisory council. So, the composition of the advisory council. I turn to the schedule, the second schedule. The members of the advisory council, of whom there shall be not more than 15 nor less than 9, shall be appointed by the minister after consultation with such organizations as he considers appropriate, and shall include, A, in relation to each of the activities specified in subparagraph 2, at least one person appearing to the minister to have wide and recent experience of that activity. And what are those activities? The activities referred to are A, the practice of medicine other than veterinary medicine, the practice of dentistry, the practice of veterinary medicine, the practice of pharmacy. So in relation to each of these activities, at least one person to be on the advisory council. The other categories, persons appearing to the minister to have wide and recent experience of health and social problems connected with the misuse of drugs. The minister shall appoint one of the members of the advisory council to be chairman of the advisory council. And the advisory council may appoint committees which may consist in part of persons who are not members of the Advisory Council, to consider and report to the Advisory Council on any matter referred to them by the Advisory Council. So that's the composition. You see a fairly wide-ranging composition with a number of technical persons and individuals who would have an interest and competence in these matters. And the committee, not more than 15, not less than 9. And the minister has to consult with such organizations as he deems appropriate, and he shall name one of them to be the chairperson. I then go on further now in section 3 of the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs. I've just read section 1 in the schedule. I turn now to, subsection 1 in the schedule. I turn now to subsection 2. I just want listeners to bear with me. I will try to make the references as simple as possible for you to understand as I go along. Subsection 2 says, it shall be the duty of the Advisory Council to keep under review the situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with respect to drugs which are being or appear to them likely to be misused, and of which the misuses having or appears to them capable of having harmful effects sufficient to constitute a health or social problem, and to give to the minister whether either the Advisory Council considers it expedient to do so, or they are consulted by the minister to advise on matters whether or not involved in alteration of the law, which in the opinion of the Advisory Council ought to be taken for preventing the misuse of such drugs and for dealing with health or social problems connected with their misuse, and in particular on measures which in the opinion of the Advisory Council ought to be taken in a number of different areas, such as restricting the availability of drugs or supervising the arrangements to supply, enabling persons affected by the misuse of drugs to have proper advice, and so on and so forth. The first thing to appreciate is that the Advisory Council is an advisory body, and it has, given the thrust of the question, a responsibility to advise as to any changes of the law. And there are other specific sections in relation to the Drug Prevention of Misuse Act, which specifically requires the Advisory Council to address certain matters. So I turn now, having read what the law is, since the questioner raised that, so that we have an appreciation. What is the status of the Drug Advisory Committee? Well, I've just read what is the status, what are the powers under which it functions, and the composition. To the best of my information, and I received these particular questions today, and I've been able to consult the Permanent Secretary, but I know enough about this to speak without that particular advice from the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, that the Advisory Committee has been in abeyance for some time, and therefore has not met for quite a while. The members of the committee, their term has expired. And 3 meetings of cabinet I requested of the Minister of Health to begin the consultation on the appointment of a new advisory committee, Drug Advisory Council, precisely because we want to prepare just in case the CARICOM Commission on the decriminalization of marijuana in respect of medical marijuana is addressed in some favorable way. And the Attorney General has been working on the possible alterations in the law, and there has been a draft in that regard. But that draft, of course, would be fed through the Advisory Council. The question C, basically, what legal role the body will play? Well, I've just outlined that. They have an advisory consultative role. The question 2, I may just say I expect, hopefully, by the end of this year, that we will have a new advisory council on the misuse of drugs, and to begin the operation from next year. Question 2. Scientific studies across the globe has shown that 1 in every 6 persons, this is the questioner asking this, 1 in every 6 persons under the age of 14 and 1 in every 11 persons under the age of 7 who smoke cannabis, and as such as 25% daily users will develop dependence or addiction. Scientific studies have also shown that persons who smoke cannabis recreationally are twice as likely to develop psychoses, and further that with the chronic use of ODD's ratio for a number of cancers, respiratory difficulties and bone depletion is 2 to 3 or significant. In light of these findings, could you identify which programs within the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment or in the wider government is responsible for the national drug demand prevention or reduction? First of all, the preamble to the question, I just want to say that we have a number of experts who will contest a number of the propositions advanced in the question as matters which are factual or to have them refined. This is not to say, of course, that the misuse of drugs, in the case cannabis, that the misuse of cannabis is one which, the misuse and abuse of cannabis, notice the words, the misuse and abuse of cannabis do in fact create health difficulties. The misuse and abuse of alcohol do create health difficulties. And of course there are other drugs which are quite addictive, for instance, cocaine. There is research which indicate that marijuana is not addictive or indeed a gateway drug, but there are other research which shows the other side. And so to identify within the Ministry of Health or the wider government which programs are responsible for drug demand prevention or reduction. Well, there are several programs. There, generally speaking, the health education program, and this has been addressed through the health education program. Secondly, the outreach program of the Permanent National Commission on Crime Prevention addresses that. Within the police force and other agencies, there is DARE, the agency related to the reduction of drugs and the use of drugs. There is also the social welfare, the social development agency in many of its social welfare ministry, social development ministry, in many of its dimensions, including the work which they do with juvenile delinquency, what they do with Liberty Lodge and other such supportive groups. And then, of course, we have established, I don't know if persons are aware of it, some 27 police youth clubs in which the fight against the drugs and the use and misuse of drugs constitute a very important part of their work. That work goes on. Could you point to any evidence of their work recently? They're working on an ongoing basis. And I'd really like to invite the questioner to who is a professional in a field related to the medical sciences to be involved with these programs. Then it goes on, C. Given that the recent studies have shown that states or regions that has legalized marijuana for medicinal use, the recreational use among the youths has increased substantially, and given that the marijuana grown in St. Vincent and Grenadines has been tested and shown to contain the highest concentration of THC in the region, and given that marijuana-induced psychoses has a direct relation to the strength of THC and regularity of cannabis use, can you indicate whether the CARICOM Commission has been mandated to review the impact of the increased recreational use of marijuana with a higher concentration of THC? Well, first of all, the there is controversy relating to the assertion made, here's a factual one, that the states which have decriminalized marijuana, that recreational use among youths have increased substantially, because in a number of the areas, there are limitations, even though you have decriminalization, as to the age for young people to consume it. For instance, persons below the age of 18, they're not even a regime of decriminalization and not permitted to. There are restrictions in relation to carrying the drug around schools and the like. That marijuana grown in St. Vincent has been shown and tested to contain the highest concentration of THC in the region. Well, you know, there's always this folklore, not tested work, comparison between the ganja from here and the ganja from Jamaica. I remember Prime Minister Portia Simpson at a CARICOM meeting speaking about the legendary strength of Jamaican ganja. And I had to point out to her that on the evidence which was before me, that the ganja, the marijuana which is produced in the United States, has in fact a far higher concentration of THC than the marijuana which is grown in St. Vincent and Grenadines or in Jamaica. And they are in fact specifically grown, particular types. Yes. They are engineered in terms of the biotechnology to have a stronger THC. So so if there's a decriminalization, you may wish if persons are thinking that they will sell Jamaican ganja or Vincy ganja with a higher THC, what they're having in the U.S. grown right now has a much higher THC content. The fact is that the CARICOM Commission is mandated to address all of these matters. Now, whatever the CARICOM Commission does, and whatever the CARICOM heads of government decide, it still would be the responsibility of each state, whether they go along with one or more or all of the recommendations which arise, if indeed the recommendations point to medical marijuana or the decriminalization. And if there's any decriminalization, obviously it would be for relatively small quantities for personal and religious use. I want to say this, that all of these things are still in the stage of a discussion. And in fact, interestingly, today, shortly after I received these questions, the CARICOM Secretariat called me with suggestions of names of persons to actually sit to complete the commission, because CARICOM has approved the terms of reference, and now the selection process is going on in respect of the persons to sit on the commission. I want to state that one group of investors out of the United States, Canada, because as you know, Canada has decriminalized marijuana for medicinal purposes, and they want to come here and to be engaged in this matter. Of course, for them to be engaged, the law would have to be altered, and we are waiting to see what CARICOM said. But I indicated to them that what we want, or the great interest which we want, is to set up a pharmaceutical enterprise here in conjunction with foreign investors. We would not be involved in owning equity in the enterprise, but naturally, as I say, in conjunction, because we'll have to facilitate in a number of ways as we facilitate any investment for a pharmaceutical enterprise which would use marijuana and other products here for medicinal purposes, including bringing in the particular commodities and to be able also to make drugs, make pharmaceutical products here. In other words, to build a pharmaceutical industry. And that is the answer to the question. There can be other things which I can say, but I think I have given a sufficient rounded answer. But I can always provide more details.